Good afternoon. Good. How are you? Good. Afternoon, colleagues. We should be starting shortly. We're just waiting for a few more people to join us. And I do have all the students in the room, but we should have more people online. Afternoon, colleagues. I think we can get started, and then the other people will join us as we are starting. So let me quickly introduce our presenter today. We are privileged to have Dr. Katsaura from Wits University. Dr. Katsaura is a senior lecturer in the Department of Sociology at the University of Witwatersrand, and his research primarily focuses on urban sociology, but of course with specific interest in transnational urbanism, religious urbanism, urban politics, as well as urban violence. And his work is featured in numerous academic journals, including the International Journal of Urban and Regional Studies, Urban Forum, and African Studies. So without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Katsaura to kickstart the talk today.
Okay, thanks very much, Dr. Gukurume. It's a pleasure to see all of you online. I see some familiar faces. Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity to engage. Let me put my video on, yeah, so that at least we can see the face and be able to put, the name to the face. Yeah, so good afternoon, all of you. I'm going to just be showing some slides, but I can also speak without the slides if you prefer. But yeah, let me just show the slides. I'll be speaking mostly off cuff. This is a developing paper where I'm trying to work through understanding the city through the concept of suspicion, or sociology of suspicion. So I'm working here with an idea of urbanisms of suspicion. So let me show the screen now. Oh, it's sharing already. Okay, no. Okay, I don't know. Can maybe thumbs up or something to show that you can see me? You can just do a thumbs up. Okay, I'm not able to see. I'm now seeing my screen. So, but I believe you can hear me. Thanks.
Yes, we can.
Yes. So this is an idea that came through in my bid to understand. I mean, how African urbanites in various metropolises, engage with the city in a context of so much uncertainty, so much insecurity, and so forth. And it just, dawned on me that, these cities, in Africa, particularly the biggest cities that we have, are characterized by a lot of distrust, a lot of suspicion, which is actually, a mode of being in the city itself, a mode of existence in the city, and a form of defense, in situations characterized by so much risk, so much uncertainty, and several other challenges that we all know in our cities, including crime, and so forth and so forth. So that's how I came up with this idea, and I'm trying to develop it. And this particular paper, which is very much at its infancy, is drawing on fieldwork experiences in 3 different African metropolises. West Africa, I'm looking at Lagos. Here in Southern Africa, I have got Johannesburg, and a bit of insights coming out of Harare. So you will see that I'm drawing some examples from these 3 cities, but particularly heavily concentrated on drawing examples from Johannesburg and Lagos. All right. So I just want to quickly reflect on my methodology. I understand we have a lot of PhD students here, so just to speak to the methodology, the study is based mainly on urban ethnography, where I did spend a lot of time immersing myself into various spaces, in the cities that I'm talking about here. Lagos, since 2015, I've been frequenting Lagos, engaging in ethnography in various spaces in that particular city. So you see that I'll draw from this city in terms of some of my narratives. Cumulatively, I could say that I've spent more than 150 days in Lagos for purposes of ethnography. So you can see this is a long-term project, starting from 2015, 2017, 2018, 2019. I've been doing a lot of fieldwork in that city up to 2020. Johannesburg, of course, this is the city in which I live. I have been immersed in the spaces of Johannesburg as an ethnographer, dating back from about 2010. Even my own doctoral thesis is based on studies in Johannesburg. So therefore, I'll be drawing on a lot of ethnographic experience from this particular city. Harare, I've also spent some time doing some work there in various spaces as well. So I don't know, there are some echoes. Is everything clear on your side?
Yeah, it is. We can hear you. Let me try to sort that out.
Yeah, because I'm hearing some echoes on my side. Yeah, so basically, this study is a culmination of many years of engagements, ethnographic engagements in the various city spaces from these 3 cities I'm mentioning here. So it's long-term ethnography. It's not based on fleeting interactions in the city or anything like that. in these cities, but actually in long-term ethnography. I understand for postgraduate students, this is not always possible because you always have maybe 1 year to complete your studies, and sometimes you just run into the field and spend a month, and then you are off. You want to go and write off your research report. But as you think about your research, please think in terms of longevity, spending much more time, and building a project over a long period. And if you look at my studies in Lagos, I mean, my research there was mainly focusing on religious urbanism, but this particular study is not focusing on that. It's observations that I made on the side whilst, pursuing that project. All right. Now, what is urbanism of suspicion, or urbanisms of suspicion? What are we talking about here? Let me start with the narrative here from Lagos. Can you see the whole PowerPoint?
Yes, we can see the PowerPoint.
Okay, because on my side there's something popping up. Let me just try to minimize it. Okay. Okay, I can leave. Okay, so if you are seeing it, I can leave it like that. So I just want to speak about Lagos. I'm going to draw on a particular observation made in Lagos, in a neighborhood there called Onike-Yaba, which is in Lagos mainland. It's one of the most highly populated neighborhoods in that particular city. During one of my visits in 2017 there, whilst on a field research trip there, I lodged myself into a particular hotel called Hotel Caracas. This is the real name of the hotel, by the way. Yeah. Whilst lodged in that hotel, there was also another gentleman who was lodged in the same hotel. His name, I'm using a pseudonym here. I'm just calling him Emeka. So we arrived more or less at the same time during the same period, and we were scheduled to stay there for at least 3 to 4 weeks, in that hotel. And after having stayed in that hotel for about a week, Emeka just discovered that some US dollars had been stolen from his monarch, his luggage bag, which he kept in the hotel room. But the thief, took 700 US dollars and left 1,300 US dollars from that bag. So it was quite surprising how a thief can enter a room and steal 700 and leave, 1.3. It was a total sum of, US dollar 2,000, right? And Emeka would always lock his hotel room, on leaving to go out, to go about his business in the city. And suddenly, one of the days, he was just checking his money and found out that some amount is missing, quite mysteriously. But during that time when we were together at the hotel, during that time, he then approached the hotel manager to ask him to, investigate this issue, to find out what could have happened. The assumption was that probably, one of the workers, maybe the cleaners, could be responsible for stealing this money. Upon talking to the hotel manager, the only thing he could promise is that he was going to see a spiritualist to try to find out if anyone amongst these workers was the thief. Because these are the only people who had access with keys. But unfortunately, he never came back to Emeka, to explain or to bring the matter to finality. And at the same time, Emeka also went to the local police station to report this particular case, and they opened the docket and so forth. And I was with Emeka during the whole process. One of the police officers that we were just talking to made a statement that this is Lagos, it's a dog-eat-dog world. Fear everybody and trust nobody. Everybody is a suspect, so never lose your guard. This particular statement, this is Lagos, is very interesting because it's one of the statements you see on a billboard on one of the major highways entering Lagos, on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. They just simply say, this is Lagos. And I think it's a loaded statement to tell you that is a space where really, like the police officer said, a dog is a dog. You really have to be on guard. If you are not on guard, you might just be baptized, by an experience in that particular city. Obviously, we all know Lagos is one of the most popular cities in Africa, perhaps the most popular city in Africa, alongside Cairo. The last time I checked, the population was over 22 million in one city, in a very small area, located with very minimal space for expansion because it's on the coastal area. The Atlantic Ocean and so forth. So the city is very much congested, and everything there is crammed somehow, and there's a very busy city. And people are always in a hurry, too much traffic jam, a lot of problems in that particular city. The city also obviously grapples with questions of security and criminality and so forth. A lot of the neighborhoods, particularly around the area that we were lodged, that is Onikeaba, which is closer to the University of Lagos. That those neighborhoods are also characterized by the presence of gangs, a lot of occultism, stuff like that. So Emeka's experience actually, somehow suggests this particular fact that things can happen, and nobody, including the police, nobody can actually help you to resolve, a criminal case, for example, like in this situation. The docket was opened, the hotel manager promised to do something, but nothing really happened. So I mean, if you look at Emeka, he also used to come to the hotel with some Nigerian friends that he had made, during this visit. Emeka was also coming from, from South Africa. I'm just giving the name Emeka, which is a Nigerian name, but it's a pseudonym. So yeah, so this is part of the experience of risk of insecurity, which is quite problematic. And from this narrative, I want us to just move on to some theoretical discussion on why we find emerging forms of urbanisms of suspicion in most African metropolises. So the critical point to make is that these cities are characterized by a lot of risk, a lot of precarity, a lot of insecurity, right? And because there's a lot of risk, a lot of precarity, a lot of insecurity, I mean, you will find that people there are always finding mechanisms of survival. And street wisdom demands that you suspect everybody, like the police officer warned us. Street wisdom demands that you are alert. You have a sense of of a blessed mentality. If you are to read Worth's work, you need to be alert, to have street wisdom. It's very, very important in a context where there's risk, there's uncertainty, there's unpredictability, and you can fall victim, to crime at any time. Even yourself, you can be disposable. If you know Lagos, you understand that there's also a lot of possibility for banditry, including kidnappings, particularly of well-known people or of people suspected to be rich. So there are gangsters that are there that can actually kidnap, to the extent that important persons in Lagos move around with police guard in that particular city in Lagos. If you are important, maybe you are a high court judge or a prominent priest, a prominent pastor. I can give examples. During my stay there, pastors like TB Joshua, for example, pastors like Dr. DK Olukoya of the Mountain of Fire and Miracles Ministry, pastors like Dr. Kumui of Deeper Life Christian Lives, they would always move around with an entourage of police officers. In other words, you can actually hire police officers and put them on payroll for your personal security if you are a very important person. So you must always be on alert. You must always be suspicious of the person next to you, and therefore there's a high level of risk. In other words, we can notice the riskization of life generally. In cities such as Lagos, and to some extent, to a great extent, of course, I mean, a city like Johannesburg, and to some extent even Harare, So risk is a major point. There we draw on Ulrich Beck, who writes about risk society. So there's this riskization of everyday life that we have to, to observe and analyze in this particular context. And obviously, in this particular, paper, I am concerned with the question of the stranger. And I draw a little bit on George Simmel, who wrote a lot on the stranger. A stranger is a person of unknown address, somehow untraceable, and so forth. And if you look at these major African cities, Lagos, if you look at Johannesburg, obviously we are bombarded by strangeness. We are bombarded by strangers, every time. And therefore, in the presence of strangers, in the presence of strangeness, you can never afford to lose your guard. If you do, obviously there could be consequences. Including falling victim to criminality and other forms of of risk. I also draw in this particular paper on Jean Baudrillard. I believe you all know Jean Baudrillard, who writes on simulation and the simulacra, that in fact reality itself is an illusion, and as it goes, when you are in these particular cities, Lagos, Johannesburg, even Harare to some extent, but maybe to a lesser extent compared to the other two, you ought to, be aware of the fact that things do not, things are not always the way they seem, right? There's always a sense in which various forms of association, including economic practices, are characterized by simulation. In fact, you can speak in terms of the economies and socialities of the counterfeit, is characterizing these cities. Fakery, forgery, and all these forms of of deceit are very much key, and therefore, as a mode of being in these cities, as a mode of defense, as a mode of existence, suspicion, becomes part of everyday life. Okay, I'm also checking my time. Yeah, so theoretically, I'm drawing on these three major theories in terms of informing my coining of this idea of urbanisms of suspicion. These are, for me, sociologies of suspicion in some ways, sociologies of risk, which are quite critical. Okay, now let us move to the second section of this particular paper. I'm going to start off with an anecdote. This is based on personal experience in the city of Johannesburg. We can also draw parallels to the anecdote I've given regarding Emeka's experience in Onike Yaba, in Lagos. Now, this is a personal experience that I had in Yeovil, in 2013. I spent a lot of time in Yeovil doing ethnographic fieldwork there, culminating in my PhD. During 2013, during this time when I made this observation, I'd already completed my PhD, but I was still very much rooted and embedded in Yeovil, because when I was doing this fieldwork, I stayed in this particular neighborhood, tantamount what I termed renting and tending with Malinowski, in an urban setting like Yeovil. In other words, establishing a tent by renting, in this particular space to be able to observe in greater detail the workings of everyday life. Now, here goes the story. That is 2013. I went to one of the busiest streets of Yeovil, that is Rocky Raleigh Street. I was driving a particular vehicle. I parked it there and just went into Dibonet's Pizza to purchase, some food there. Upon coming back, I realized that the window of my car had been smashed, and the laptops, including even my passport, which was in the boot of the car, had been stolen. They just smashed the window and opened the boot and collected everything. I was in the company of a colleague there. We actually had two laptops in the bag, in the boot of the car. Both of the laptops were stolen, and even both of our passports were stolen, right? in that particular incident. And this happened just, if you see this particular image here, you will see the police station is very close. You have a police station. There's an arrow pointing to the police station. This happened just less than 40 meters from where the police station is located. Upon seeing this incident, we went to the police to report this particular case. A docket was also opened, but the police never bothered to even come to the scene to see, or observe what had happened, to just have a look. I mean, common sense would demand that the police would just come and see what has happened there. They didn't. We opened the case, yes, but the police told us to go and do our own investigations on the street. They told us that go and speak to the people on the street, maybe you can recover some of the stolen items. As a result, I spent some time on the streets making those investigations. And one of the days while I was making those investigations myself, I mean, it became also part of my research in that sense. I went to ShopRite, that is in Rocky Raleigh Street in Yove. In front of ShopRite there are some guys who sell DVDs and sell other, objects and goods and so forth. Yeah, I was able to speak to one of the guys. I'm just going to call him Kululi for, as a pseudonym. That guy told me that he knows of this incident of the smashing of the car window and so forth, and he could help us to recover, the lost documents. Obviously, the laptops, even if you know who stole them, you wouldn't recover them. But he told us that if we had lost our passports, we should go to the Ghana house, in Yove, and check if the passports had been stored there, because in Yove, as I observed, there's a whole economy of the production and reproduction of counterfeit documents. So we went to the Ghana house in Yove. There was a gentleman there. We spoke to him, and he said, "Well, if the thieves had stolen the passports from Yove, they wouldn't sell them to them." He directed us to another Ghana house in Beria. Beria is just a neighborhood adjacent to Hubro, but I mean, for me, I would just call it Hubro, all of it. So I'm just going to say Hubro. So we went to the Ghana house in Hubro. When we got there, we realized that it's actually a restaurant. But it's just, being a restaurant is just like a front, because at the back of it, a lot of activities are going on. There is actually a center for the reproduction of counterfeit documents, counterfeit IDs, South African IDs, counterfeit passports. And this is a place where even the stolen passports are sold by the criminals at a fee. So when there, we spoke to the gentleman, who is responsible for this business of reproduction of counterfeit documents. He said, "Please wait." After trusting us, of course, he said, "Please wait." He went upstairs, came back with a bunch of passports. We gave him our names because, like I said, it's 2 passports that had been stolen. He looked and looked and looked. Fortunately, one of the passports of my colleague was recovered. But to get the passport back, we had to pay a fee. I think at that time it was 250 rand, to pay for your own passport. Just imagine. My own passport was never recovered for some reason. I don't know why. But this is just to show you that the smashed car window led us to gave us a window to peep through Johannesburg's underworld of criminality and counterfeitism, where we were able to to get to understand the workings of this underworld, of this world of criminality, of course, concatenated with the world of counterfeitism as well, where perhaps, things, as you can see, do not always, things are not always the way they seem, right? At the face of it, the Ghana house is like a restaurant, but in reality, it's actually a center, a hub for the reproduction of counterfeit documents, right? So when you now, look at it, you understand why in a city like Johannesburg, almost everybody is operating with a kind of defensive posture, right? And there's, of course, a need for street wisdom in navigating this city. And throughout the city, one observes the presence of defensive architecture in the form of road closures. You go to various neighborhoods, you realize that, people are enclosed in, gated communities. People are living behind iron bars, as a way to ward off the stranger, the threat of the stranger, the threat of the criminal. I mean, all of us, that is the mentality, that you observe in Johannesburg. I can add another anecdote regarding some observations made in, when we were doing research with colleagues, in the area around Park Station, in the city center, CBD of Johannesburg, where you might see people standing outside, particularly in the mornings. During that time, when we did the research, I think it was 2015, 2016. We spent a lot of time in that inner city part of Johannesburg, around Park Station, Joubert Park, and so forth. And we struck a lot of conversations with people there. It's like in that particular part of the city, we do have a hub of criminals. A lot of these people live in these hijacked buildings where they pay per day, and these people are said to come out of these buildings in the morning to engage in some criminal activities, including mugging of people, particularly people who are engaged in cross-border movement. Those who are arriving at Park Station in the morning between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. during that time at Park Station, muggings will be ongoing outside of Park Station, because they'll be expecting that some people who are disembarking from the buses, particularly those who were coming to Joburg for business purposes with some money, obviously, they would always fall victim to this form of criminality. I remember speaking to one of the guys there, Zimbabwean, who was selling in front of Park Station, who gave us a vivid explanation of what happens there, indicating that a lot of these people that you see standing or moving around are most likely criminals, because they know them anyway. They see them mugging people, particularly travelers from Zimbabwe who would come to do some purchases in the city, obviously with money, So a lot of people fell victim, to that form of criminality in the morning. These people might look like they are innocently loitering around, but actually they are surveying, for the next victims of their mugging activities in the city. So at the end of the day, in a city like this, obviously, like you see here, everybody, most people, summon various forms of street wisdom. Even those who are coming from Zimbabwe to shop in South Africa, they would know what to do, like putting your money inside your an undergarment. You wear an undergarment with a pocket. That's where you would put your money. So defensive postures, a lot of street wisdom is needed. But overall, in many of the neighborhoods in Johannesburg, even if you go to Yove, there was a Urania village there, which is actually a gated neighborhood to close off, these potential, criminals, to be able to ward off strangers and so forth, as a way of defending themselves against criminality. So crime, violence, and so forth, is one of the drivers of this emerging, of this urbanism of suspicion that I'm talking about here. Right. So, in addition to criminality, of course, connected to it is the establishment of, what I'm calling economies of the counterfeit in our African metropolises. I'm just going to draw from an example, a Joburg example. I mean, Harare, there are several examples, but I mean, there's not much time to talk about everything. Okay, so here I just want to refer to one experience. Of these two people that I'm mentioning here, Gary and George. These are again pseudonyms. These are Zimbabwean guys that I had interacted with and worked with before. I even did research with them. At some point in December of 2016, they were preparing, of course, for the December festivities. They wanted to travel to Zimbabwe, and they were looking to buy US dollars, And through a connection from church, they were linked up with somebody who was engaged in the money changing business in Johannesburg. They met up with the person in Park Station. They exchanged their rands for dollars. I mean, an amount amounting to the equivalence of $500 at that time. Of course, the rate was about 1:13. So you can imagine they did a transfer of money to this guy. They got the US dollars. Later on, they just realized that these US dollars were fake, right? They had been conned. They'd been conned. So this is just a story that I'm mentioning. But again, if you look at the landscape of Johannesburg, you will see that I mean, this whole economy of the counterfeit is thriving. For example, back to Juve, where I did some of this field work, in front of ShopRite, they would always see people selling fake CDs. It's a huge economy, and many other fake things that are in circulation, on the market. So there's always a chance, in Johannesburg that you can fall victim to, to these counterfeit objects, including counterfeit money, and so forth. There's a lot of piracy, forgery, fakery. Here I'm reminded to draw on the work of Jean and John Komarov in Law and Disorder and the Post-Colony, where they write about these economies of the counterfeit. And because of this, again, I mean, residents, urbanites, of course, those with a blessed attitude, a blessed mentality, will always be on the lookout for distinguishing between the fake and the counterfeit. At least if you buy pirated objects, you should know that it is indeed pirated, because obviously it is cheaper. Yeah, right. So this is a major challenge, in these African cities, where thriving economies of the counterfeit are an everyday experience. And therefore, I refer to this quotation from a conversation with one Lehasa in Yove, 2017, who says, in Johannesburg, what you see, what you see is not always what you get, right? And what you get is not always what you see, something like that. That, I mean, things are very much elusive. There's a lot of simulation, both in terms of the everyday economic practices, but also in terms of the everyday social practices. So you are likely to fall victim if you are not on the lookout, and if you don't have a capacity to sift through, various experiences, to sift through particularly various, economic transactions, to be able to exactly know what you are getting, because of this widespread economy of the counterfeit. It's everywhere. Okay. Piracy. I mean, I'm also reminded of the work of Abdul Malik Simon on urban piracy. So piracy is everywhere. Mimicry is everywhere. I mean, even a whole economy of counterfeit, label, shoes, Nike, Adidas, everyone, the street, they are there. They are being sold cheaply. So you have to know this particular economy for you to be able to survive. And you always have to suspect whatever you are seeing, confirm it at least. Have a means, a wisdom to be able to distinguish between the fake and the original. All right, I'm seeing that I'm running out of time. I'm trying to round off in about 5 minutes or 3 minutes, so that we can have a discussion for 20 minutes. Right, so even in terms of everyday interaction, one has to be on guard as well. I mean, everyday social interaction beyond the engagement and ability to decipher, sift through the economies of the counterfeit. One must also be able to sift through, various forms of association, because often these forms of association tend to be simulated, right? I'm again going to draw from one story here of a guy called, I'm just going to call him Kumbulani, who lived in Juve also during this time I was doing field work. Kumbulani just picked a girl from the street, and this particular girl, they ended up with a kind of sustained relationship. He would always bring the girl to his house and so forth and so forth. More like they were in love, right? But after a while, because I knew Kumbulani because I was engaging with him, where I was renting, like I said, he was staying on the same premises where I was renting whilst I was doing field work. So they dated, I don't know if I call it dating, whatever I call it, for a long time, almost up to 1 month. And at some point now, Kumbulani wanted to get rid of this girl. He was no longer interested in the relationship. And one day he came back from work and found out that his apartment had been broken into. And this girl stole money from the apartment, and he also tore apart his passport, right? So what I'm saying here is, even in terms of erotic geographies and various forms of social interaction in the city, there's a lot of simulation. I mean, a lot of fakery in terms of these engagements. A lot of the engagements, social interactions are not always genuine because there's always a chance that that person you're interacting with might be up to something. I remember during our field work in Johannesburg, when we were looking at issues of criminality there, some of the participants we spoke to were saying that one of the tricks that the criminals were using when they wanted to steal from you is that they might even hug you whilst you're walking and pretend like they're your brother. They will be shouting and say, "Ah, my brother, a long time. Eh? We've been looking for you." They will be great. They will be give you a hug and so forth whilst they are already searching you, taking out valuables from your pocket, such as phones and money and so forth. So such kinds of interactions might look genuine, but they are not. Right? So there has to be a sense of distrust, a sense of suspicion with which Ebena in Joburg or even in Lagos, or even in Harare, this, in terms of how they approach the city and how they approach their interactions with strangers in the city, right? So the geographies of the city are awash with, these simulated forms of interaction. They are awash with, if you have to borrow from Baudrillard, from the simulacra, that reality itself is actually an illusion. Sometimes what you see and you think is reality is actually in fact an illusion. Something else might be going on, and what you see on the surface of social interaction might actually be concealing something deeper that is going on. So we always have to, to be on high alert. So even in terms of courtship, this can happen. Like in the case of Kumbulani, who just picked up this girl, engaged with her, but it turned out that that came with a lot of problems. That the girl also, was interested in something else, including, breaking into his house to steal and destroy his passport. And the story of Kumbulani is interesting because it's, like my own case, it also takes us into the underworld of counterfeitism, where Kumbulani was a joiner and carpenter, and after this incident of the stealing of his passport, he was in so much trouble because he was supposed to travel for work to Mauritius in 1 week's time. And interestingly, what Kumbulani did was to go into Yovel and get a counterfeit passport with another name, which is not his original name, and they put on a face of his on that passport. Kumbulani is a Zimbabwean, and he was able to travel to Mauritius with that fake passport and came back. God knows how, but it happened. So it again, this particular experience of Kumbulani drew us into a peep into this underworld of counterfeitism within the spaces of Johannesburg. All right, so in conclusion, what we are just learning from this particular paper is that, everyday risks in our urban spaces in Africa, particularly in these large metropolises such as Johannesburg, Lagos, and in also cities like Harare. I didn't give any example from Harare, but I do have a lot of narratives, urban risks, criminality, and contentment with the stranger or with strangeness all the time, and of course counterfeit economies always somehow generate a sense of suspicion or call for a sense of suspicion. In other words, suspicion becomes a primordial mode of urban being and existence. and the response to and the function of criminal and counterfeit economies in the city. It's a mode of defense. So therefore, we see that these urban spaces are awash with life worlds of suspicion, as my title suggests. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This is by way of conclusion.
Yeah, no.
I don't know if I can hear anything. If anyone is speaking, I'm not sure, because I don't seem to be hearing anything.
Okay. Am I muted?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay. Confirm if you can hear.
Yeah, I can hear.
Okay, okay. No, thank you very much for that interesting presentation. Let me quickly open up maybe to questions. I'll start with students who are here. And then I'll move online. Anyone who would want to ask?
Maybe, should I continue to project this, or I can remove it so that I can also maybe I can also see you guys from where you are. It would be interesting to also see you.
Yes. I think you
I
can
stop sharing.
remove them. Yeah, you can remove them.
Okay. So that I can also see who is online and stuff. Thanks.
All right. Yeah, so guys would want to ask any questions online? Yes, Kumo.
Yes. I have a question on your point when you mentioned defensive posture. I just want to know what is that exactly? And when you first said it, but I just want like sort of clarification if I'm thinking the right thing. Is defensive posture related to things such as, besides how people prepare themselves to walk in town? Because I know, for example, from my own experience, where in Joburg, my aunt used to tell me that when you are in certain parts of Joburg, you must carry your money in your boots as a woman, and the guy must walk like they know what they came there to do, like almost as if like hands behind their back, gangster vibes almost. Is that what you're referring to when you speak about defensive posture, or is there more depth to what it means?
Yeah, you got it right. But maybe I can get more questions and then respond.
Yes, Jacqueline, I think you wanted to.
No, I just wanted to say there are many things that happen that are interesting. And I heard that you mentioned that this was an ethnography.
Yes.
So I want to know, what was your position in terms of being maybe a participant or an observer? What was your position?
I think we can take two more airports. You want to? Mpebisi.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we
yes,
can hear. Yes.
Okay, so in the presentation, I'm not sure, but you mentioned.
Maybe you can speak up a little bit. Or maybe use your mic if that's fine.
Yeah, Doc, in your presentation, you mentioned something related to you talking to criminals per se who engage in such activities as crime and robbery and such. So what I want to know is, how did you gain the participants' trust in like how they information that they are giving you that is valuable? How did you gain their trust to give you valuable information or for them to be comfortable enough?
Okay. Yeah, I believe there should be one more question, perhaps. I can't hear you guys now. I don't know what's happening. I last read the question. The question regarding talking to criminals. That was the last question I took down here. I don't know if there's another question.
So, as a researcher, you say.
Can you hear? Sorry, Tatu.
Yes, I can hear.
Okay, go ahead, Tatu.
You faced being robbed, and I think your safety was also compromised. How did you handle that, and how did you not handle your bias? Because you could have interpreted this in another way, because your feelings were involved, and how did you navigate the whole thing? And also, did you get to understand what was the reason there was a high level of crime in the urban areas that the cities that you connected recently?
Okay, maybe you can repeat your question again, if possible. I'm just hearing something about me. How did I position myself in terms of my feelings? Is there any additional layer?
Yeah, I'm saying your bias as a researcher. How did you reflect on your bias? Because I believe that you were robbed and your feelings, like they were affected. So you were already involved in this topic. So how did you manage to not
No, I think Tato is foregrounding the idea of victimhood in how it's reflected in your analysis and maybe the way you write and put that into text, given that we're not only theorizing.
Okay, Dr. Gukurume, I think you are breaking a bit, but I took the point about victimhood, and I mean, being so much involved, and how did I mean, I'm not just theorizing, but I'm actually also writing a personal experience, isn't it? That is the comment, the expansion on the comment that you are making. Because you broke after that.
Auto ethnography and the bias.
You are breaking, but it's fine. I don't know. Maybe you can allow me to respond to the 4 questions.
Yes, go ahead. Yes.
Okay, thanks very much. Sorry, I can sometimes you are breaking. I don't know, maybe connectivity issues. Okay, so yeah, I'll start with the first comment. I don't think it's okay. It was a question, but I think the person asking the question also clarified it. They didn't pick it up properly. I mean, this idea of defensive posture. I mean, it's just a way of being in the city, of engaging with the city, including a way of walking in the city with an awareness of the need for self-preservation. Like you said, you work with your money and belongings in your bra, or like also the example I gave, people wearing shorts with pocket inside, to be able to, to keep their money as far away from the grasp of criminals as possible, but also just the way of walking. I mean, I'm sure there's a Joburg way of walking, there's a Lagosian way of walking, right? So if you are in Rome, you should do as the Romans do, right? So if you're in Joburg, I mean, even dress code matters. I can give you another story of a colleague of mine, a friend of mine, who was robbed in the city, but I blamed that on his dressing, right? Yeah, he was just dressed like a very old man with a long jacket. It was cold, and the criminal saw him and he was holding a bag. It was like he's just arriving. The guy lived in Bloemfontein, so it was just like he's just arriving, and it was a park station. Yeah, and the guys just cornered him and mugged him and took all the money. So it really matters how you dress, how your bodily dispositions. They really matter. So if you understand the context, then you must dress appropriately, walk appropriately. There are certain ways of dressing and ways of walking that can just betray you as a novice in the city. Or if you are just trying to look everywhere around, you look like you are puzzled, or then it causes a lot of problems. I mean, and you can end up with an experience like the one that I've just mentioned of this friend of mine who was mugged, at Park Station because of the way he was dressed and the fact that he was holding a lot of bags. Obviously, when you are at Park Station and you have a lot of bags, you are just inviting them to say, I'm traveling, and potentially I have disposable, losable, goods that they can take advantage of. They can baptize you like that. Yeah, even myself, I remember it happened to me. Even myself, at Park Station again. The first day I arrived in Joburg, I didn't have a phone. I didn't have a phone. I was trying to look for those telephone booths, to make a phone call. So I disembarked the bus, went to the telephone booth. As I'm making a call, this guy just appears and says, "Give me money." Because he just saw that this guy is arriving, he's confused, he doesn't know anything. I think it was 2008. Yeah, it's just an experience I'm sharing as well. So the criminals have a way to read, based on your bodily posture. They can read you and be able to see if you're a potential victim. Yeah, so that is very important. So once you are accustomed to a particular city, whether it's Lagos or Johannesburg, there's a way of walking. I mean, I spent a lot of time in Lagos. There's a way of doing things there, even a manner of dressing that will make you blend in, and not look like you are just a novice in the city. Okay, and remember the statement, this is Lagos. So it means there are certain ways of doing things there that you must accustom yourself to. Thank you. Then question number 2, which I believe is very much linked to the last question on bias. The positioning, my positioning as a participant or as an observer. I mean, if you are doing ethnography, you have to oscillate between different positionings. I mean, I don't think you can simply be an observer, particularly in an urban setting where you want to understand what's going on. You want to understand everyday life. There's no way you can understand everyday life without participating in it, right? So even as I spent, almost like half a year in Lagos at different points, in my research, obviously, I mean, I had to do, like I said earlier, when you're in Rome, do as Romans do. When you're in Lagos, do as Lagosians do, right? So I mean, you have to participate in the local, social interactions. You have to participate in the local economy. Particularly in my research, I spend a lot of time, in various spaces, including churches, right? So, yeah, I mean, definitely, ethnography demands that you somehow participate in the everyday social activities, interactions. Even if you want to be simply an observer, I don't think it's possible because your presence is already participation. Your presence can even bring a vibe, whether you like it or not, right? So I know some people say I'm just an observer. It's not possible. You observe, but your presence there is already participation. The question is, to what extent do you participate? I think that is the question, and that obviously depends on the topic at hand. Okay. Talking to criminals, right? I mean, this is very interesting. This question you're asking: how did I gain access to be able to speak to these criminals? Like I said, I mean, from the Yov experience, you notice that this happened at the conclusion. I'd already finished my PhD. I'd spent more than 3 years in that neighborhood when this happened. So I was not new to the neighborhood. I knew the neighborhood in the palm of my hands. Really, I was able to speak to people, including those on the street, and I knew the corners, right? So the only way I was able to gain a peep into this underworld of criminality and counterfeitism and so forth was through the ability to speak to people on the street. Like in this particular case, it's a street vendor who directed me to the Ghana house in Yove. When I went to the Ghana house in Yove, obviously the guy there was a bit suspicious, but he was able to embrace me because I spoke to him. He was from Ghana, so I was able to speak to him in a nice way. He could trust me in that sense. Probably maybe had seen me in the neighborhood before, who knows? And they therefore directed me to the Ghana house in Hubro. And in Hubro, I told them that I've been directed to you by. He gave me his name, that guy from the Ghana house in Hubro. He gave me his name. I had his phone number. So I said, okay, I've been directed here by so and so. They knew each other, so obviously that's how I gained trust. despite that this is an environment where there's a lot of distrust and suspicion. This is how I gained a bit of trust. And obviously, this guy is in business, so he was seeing a potential customer as well. I remember I had to buy back the other passport. Okay. Yeah, bias, feelings involved, and so forth. Obviously, when you are writing a piece like this, you really need to have a space to reflect on these kinds of things, right? To reflect on your positionality also. To reflect on your positionality, in this research. I don't think when you're doing ethnographic research, you can completely eliminate bias. Remember, even the choice of theories you use is informed by a particular way of looking at the world, right? All of us, we have particular ways of looking at the world. I can present you with the same material, or we can observe the same social activities, social interactions, and come to a different conclusion. Because obviously, each one of us is coming with into this observation with certain lenses. We are already wearing certain lenses when you come to these observations, right? And I think it's inevitable. That is why even when you write your proposal, you do have a theoretical framework which will inform you, or to some extent, even if you observe almost everything, you'll be able to pick out on what you think is important, right? Based on what you are looking for. So I don't think you can completely say this is unbiased or objective. In any case, objectivity is subjective, right? Even the truth itself is not, there's no one single truth, no one single story. So, I mean, I think you have to own up to your own positionality in any kind of writing that you'll be engaged in as a scholar. Okay, so to some extent, this was like an autoethnography. I mean, both in Johannesburg, in Lagos also, you see, I was like in the thick of things firsthand, when the story of the missing $700 happened. I was there. I was with the people. I took part in all the activities, including going to the police station and even speaking to the hotel manager, stuff like that. So yeah, definitely. When you are writing ethnography, you are also in some ways writing about yourself, particularly if you are inhabiting that city. In this case, I mean, I live in Joburg, so I'm writing about a city that I live in. In Lagos, of course, I was a visitor mostly, but I had spent so much time. I mean, I spent so much time in the city to the extent that in many ways, my own story is to do with my own experiences there, and my own observations there. I don't know if I've answered the questions. So you need to own up to your own positionality in any writing, any piece of writing. I see that there are comments coming through. I don't know, in the chat section.
Yes, there are some comments there.
Yeah, okay,
Maybe
okay.
I could possibly add one, if that is fine. I think from what you presented, it looks like the majority of the victims there are men. So I was interested in the gendered dynamics of this underworld. I know there's a story that you shared of a lady that became a perpetrator, but I don't know if you could speak a little bit more about the gender dynamics.
Okay. Yeah. So the passport that I recovered was actually my colleague is a female colleague. You see, maybe there's something there. I don't know why my passport was not recovered. Maybe it's because it had several Schengen visas, and maybe they thought they would use it. I don't know. The other one didn't have much in it in terms of visas. But let me speak to one of the experiences I had. When we almost robbed again, I was doing field work in Jubet Park. I was with Simbarashe Nyuke. Maybe you know him. Most of you know him. Yeah, I can speak to that story. We're doing research in the city center of Joburg, in Jubet Park, where we have close to the MTN rank. I don't know if you know the MTN rank. In that research, we were in the cabin of a female colleague who was also part of the research team. It emerged to us that when you are walking in the city center with a woman and you are a man, the criminals tend to target you more because they believe that when they approach you and they say, give us money, because you are with a lady, you might be quick to release whatever you have. They don't bother about the woman, they will actually target you. and leave the woman, but just focus on you. So to some extent, I think there is a gender dimension there that we can observe. In the particular case of Jubet Park, when they wanted to steal from me, I mean, we're doing research on violence, and we met violence in the city. So the guy took out a knife. I mean, I was carrying a backpack, you know, we can just call it a satchel. I had a camera and a recorder, and a laptop in there. The guy took out a knife and said, "Give me that bag." I don't know what came over me. I actually refused, and I drew a line and I said, "Just cross here and see what will happen." Yeah, he didn't attack me, but unfortunately, the other colleague, Sibarashe, whom I was with, was attacked, and they took his phone. Yeah. So also, we're speaking Shona. So that also attracted him. Language matters. You remember the issue of bodily posture. So if you speak Shona, definitely they will look at you as a potential victim with very minimal defense there, right? They had us speaking Shona. So that's why we were attacked. And apparently the guy also knew how to speak Shona. After he took Simbarash's phone,
Right.
he ran away from us speaking some obscenities. He was even insulting us as he was going away. So what I'm saying is, yeah, so the gender dynamics are there. But it looks like in the rough spaces there, if you are, for example, working with a woman, they tend to target you as a man. But it does not mean that the women are safe either. You know, I'm just giving this based on the observations that I made. That if you are working with a woman, maybe they might assume you're on a date, and maybe they will look at you as a soft target. You will not want to embarrass yourself or resist and do some funny stuff in the presence of a woman somewhere. Okay. I don't know if I make sense. Okay, so I see a comment here using central theories in capturing what is going on. Yeah, no, I think this is a very valid point. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of literature on African urbanisms on African cities that one can draw on. This is just a work in progress. Obviously, I would be interested in drawing on scholars such as Edgar Peters, Jennifer Robinson, that write on African urbanism. But again, I don't want to portray Africa as this kind of special place. I mean, as has been the case in a lot of urban studies, urban theories, urban sociology, where they treat Africa as if it's not it's its own space in some ways, right? So I think there's a space for kind of conversational approaches when engaging with these issues. Thanks. Where you can invite various theories, including African theorists. I mean, Achille Mbembe, for example, in Johannesburg, the elusive metropolis, he does theorize about Johannesburg. And I think there's a lot to be drawn from Achille Mbembe's work, particularly when he talks of Johannesburg as a seat of chance. Everybody's looking for a chance. Tatama chance is what happens in the city. All right, thanks.
Yeah, thanks very much. I see Prof. Godfrey online is a question.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Katsaura, for the presentation. So I just wanted to, it's not a matter of question, but maybe to expand in terms of analysis. The concept, I like the concept of suspicion, trying to understand urbanism in the current context. But I was wondering whether one can utilize suspicion as a metaphor within the streets of Johannesburg and the other cities, as they've highlighted. But suspicion is a metaphor of the state in Africa, and the suspicion is a metaphor of institutions within those states in Africa, particularly because the notion of trust sometimes between citizens and their respective governments tends to take a center stage, especially when you talk about issues that has to do, I know we are not talking about service delivery, but I'm talking about how sometimes governments are not trusted, even if they say we're going to deliver, but they are not going to deliver. So there's always an issue of suspicion that you are not going to do it, particularly coming from citizens. So I'm just inviting you not to theorize around service delivery, but to theorize around suspicion as a metaphor of the state in Africa, not just to utilize suspicion around the city or around the streets themselves. So, but also apart from that, because suspicion is happening within the streets. So I was wondering whether you can utilize the street itself rather than analyzing suspicion, but also analyzing the streets. So the street becomes an object of study in this regard, and the street becomes a center of analysis of understanding suspicion, because it allows us to understand suspicion. In this regard, it becomes like an objective, the objectification of the street itself that allows us to understand suspicion. So these are just my thoughts, but it's not a question, but just to have a conversation. Thank you, Prof.
No, okay, thanks. Maybe I can take more questions.
Yeah, no, I think there could be one that Dr. Josiah raised online. I think it also speaks to the materiality of the city, where maybe the one way of welcoming you into the city is that you maybe saying welcome to Joburg or welcome to Harare, and you see it materially being written there, but in other spaces you see it's written, this is Lagos. And I think Dr. Taru there was sort of asking to say, what does this tell us about the post-colonial city and the representation of the city materially? I don't know if there are any questions. Yeah. Yes, Obake.
Yes. I'm just curious. I saw Doc spoke about simulated sociation. Yes. Can you please maybe give us a explanation of that and how it contributed in the study? Because I see also the simulated erotica geographies, a very interesting concept that also I want to know what's that and how does it also contribute in the study. Perhaps also to add on Prof. Marinira's view, there's an issue of suspicion. I think suspicion also, there's an issue of race. How does it contribute also on race? Because South Africa's background, racial background, oftentimes Black people are the ones who are always suspected. You know, there's this thing in South Africa that was used in the past, swart kafar, meaning that Black is danger. So, is there any way that also we can use this urbanism of suspicion in relation to South Africa's history of suspecting Black people of always being up to no good? Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much. Yeah, I can begin to engage. Yeah, very interesting contributions. I like it. Okay, so Prof. Maningila, thank you very much. Yeah, definitely. Even when you look at urbanisms of suspicion, I mean, you can never ignore the state here, right? If you look at all the two narratives I gave from Lagos, the police are involved, right? We went to the police station. The narrative in Johannesburg, we went to the police station. I mean, can you say we can trust the police? Because in all cases, there was no positive outcome. There was even no effort, really. Maybe the Nigerian police even tried, because they did question the manager of the hotel, and they did question the owner of the hotel. But there was no conclusion to the issues. There was no finality brought to the cases. I remember even for the Joburg case, I received a message after 5 years saying the case has been closed, but there was no outcome. Because we opened the case, there was a case number. So they simply sent a message after 5 years, 3 or 5 years, I don't remember, saying case has been closed. So how can you, the state obviously becomes a suspicious entity, right? So the idea of suspicion, it's a metaphor for the state as well in many ways, as much as it is a metaphor for the state. And by the way, the street itself, is an open window to peep into many other aspects of social life, including the state. In fact, if I am to argue further, I would say, I mean, in these streets, you see the institutionalization and the habituation of suspicion. And the street becomes a window into understanding dynamics, both in the particular city like Lagos and, like Johannesburg or even like Harare, but a particular window into understanding, the state in those particular contexts. So very, very important, the point that you are raising. So we need to, I mean, it reminds you of the work of Arthur Kayerson, this book that he wrote, Oxford Street, Accra, where he looks at Oxford Street in Accra as a window to understanding not just Accra, but to understanding the making of life in Ghana, with a focus, of course, on everyday life and issues of transnationalism. So I think that is very interesting. And Arthur Kayerson is one African scholar that that we can draw on, post-colonial theorist, and I think that also relates to Josiah's question. So I think this is just a work in progress, very early, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be drawn on, including post-colonial cities, like in this particular case, Arthur Kyerson's work, which can be brought to the table somehow. Okay. Yeah, so I think Prof. Marangela, thanks for that input. Even if we are looking at the streets, we are also looking at in very many ways, at the state. The street also takes us to various social institutions and so forth. So it's very, very important. Then Obakeng, okay, simulated association. So here, I mean, this is just being. I drew it from the work of Simel, where combining Simel and Jean Baudrillard somehow. When something is simulated, there's a lot of pretense. There's a lot of fakery, somehow these interactions are not always genuine, and what you see on the ground is not necessarily real. I mean, it could be an illusion. Like the example I gave of the modus operandi of criminals that can actually embrace you, hug you, pretend like they are your very close brother, so that they can mug you and nobody does anything. Yeah, I mean, in any case, the people in Johannesburg tend to just go by, even when things are happening, right? They don't really, you can be mugged and everybody just passes by. They don't care. They'll be minding their own business because they are also suspicious that maybe these people are pretending, if I try to intervene, I find myself in trouble. You can imagine yourself when if you just look at the highways in Johannesburg, but maybe generally the highways in South Africa. If someone is standing there on the highway, raising a container for petrol, maybe, or with a packaged wheel, very few drivers will stop, isn't it? Even if it's during the day, they will just suspect that this could be hijackers. So if you find yourself with a flat tire and with an empty fuel tank and you are seeking help, unlike in other countries, I mean, in Harare, if you do that, someone will definitely stop and assist you. Here, you just need insurance because nobody will stop. It would be rare for anybody to stop for you, even if you might be in trouble, except the police. Those are the only people that you can expect to stop to try to help you. Okay, so definitely actions, everyday interactions, and so forth are characterized by illusion. They are characterized by fakery in many ways. Not everything, I mean, is real in that sense. So therefore, African Ebonites in these large cities where there's always a danger of falling victim, they are very suspicious. Like the drivers in Joburg, for example, they wouldn't stop for you, and so forth. So I think that is very, very important. Even in terms of courtship, like the story of Kumbulane that I highlighted, who just picked a girl, they were in love, they dated for almost a month. I don't know what to call that, but at the end of the day, the girl turned out to be someone who could steal from him, and even maybe did something to offend the girl, but I mean, it tells you that even erotic geographies, courtship, and so forth are characterized by simulation and fakery. And I'm very sure that Kumbulane was not even serious with this girl. He was just using her. Maybe it was some form of a transaction. I don't know. Yes, so that is very, very important. And Obakeng, again, the point you raised about race and suspicion, I mean, this is very, very clear. If you look at the gated communities, obviously there's an issue of class, an issue of race, where those who are well off and those who are predominantly well off, obviously, you might find that there's a large proportion of white people, right, who live in these posh gated neighborhoods. I'm sure if you go to Houghton Estates, you will see that very few poor people who are just working there, perhaps as gardeners or as maids, would be able to access that space. If you go to Saxon World, the same thing in Joburg. Even if you move to Randburg, the neighbors are like that. And even private homes, which are standalone, are always characterized by this defensive architecture. These are defensible spaces in many ways. People are behind high walls, behind iron bars and so forth, as if they are in prisons, just to scare away, just to ward off the stranger, the unknown, the criminal. In other words, the bodies of black people are considered as criminogenic. I mean, even migrants. If you look at even the poor neighborhoods, there's a tendency to blame migrants for all the things that are not going right. Like in Uva, where I spent a lot of time doing research, the bodies of migrants are also looked at as criminogenic, as much as the bodies of black people in the general sense are looked at as criminogenic and suspected. I can give a story again. The other time I drove to Bedfordview with a colleague. We parked our car on the street. We're trying to put on GPS because we're getting lost. Suddenly, a white guy came out and said, "What are you doing? Move from there." That's to show you, simply because I believe it's an issue of color. And the car that we were driving at that time, very old car, they just suspected that these guys can be criminals. And if you move around the landscape of Johannesburg, you see that there are a lot of street committees, WhatsApp groups, where any car that passes by in the rich neighborhoods, there's always a report. There's a suspicious car in this street. Please, please be alert. There's a suspicious person, suspicious colored men walking around, suspicious black men walking around. I belong to such streets, so people are like that, and they're always suspecting those people considered to be unwanted or stereotyped to be criminogenic in many ways, in terms of racial profiling, but also in terms of ethno-national profiling. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Doc, for sharing your insights with us. It's very helpful, even for us, for the students, and I'm happy that most of the students were engaging. And yeah, I know you have many other things to do with your busy schedule. So let me thank you for making time for us and presenting your work with us. And thank you everyone who was online for staying up to the end. We would want to invite you again next week. We do this every Tuesday during lunchtime. So thank you very much for attending, and you are welcome to attend our future sessions.
Okay, thank you so much. Maybe by conclusion, I see someone is asking about that. I do have some stories and vignettes there, but hey, the time. Yeah, but there are a lot of stories, particularly coming from the neighborhood, township called Mbari. But I don't have much time to explore those. Thanks.
No, thank you very much, Doc. I think we'll invite you again to expand on this later.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yes.